is as follows. We're going to hear from Dromex. I'll call on the Dromex person just now when I get the presentation up. We will then hear from Uvex. You don't want to miss this presentation as well. Both of them are excellent, but just keep note the Uvex one. I got goosies when I saw this presentation, part of the presentation. And then obviously the main topic, which I think you all came here for, is the show from Advocate Raynard Looch on back to the drawing board because of the OHS bill that was promulgated. But I will not elaborate too much on that. Right, ladies and gentlemen, if I can just quickly get up the Dromex one before I call on Bruce. Just give me a second. Right, we're very privileged this morning to have with us, if my presentation opens, yeah, there we go. The general manager of Dromex, and based here in KZN, they facilitate our main sponsor, our platinum annual conference sponsor here in Durban, Bruce Glendale, who's the general manager from Dromex, to tell us more about their latest innovations and some of their products and what they do also to assist you as a member when you purchase their product. Please give a warm welcome to Bruce Glendale.
It's a real honor to be here. With no further ado, let me get into the presentation. We believe that all employees in any work environment are entitled to maximum safety protection and that employees should not have to compromise the quality of their PPE they provide for their staff. I'm going to go into a slideshow now, which is not a slideshow, a video, which is a brief introduction to Dromex.
Welcome to Dromex.
We imagine a world where every worker is safe all the time. A world where confidence and comfort go hand in hand with protection. At Dromex, we're making this dream a reality. Dromex is Southern Africa's leading supplier of personal protective equipment. From hard-wearing workwear to specialized gear for hazardous environments, with over 350 different PPE products ready for every situation. We bring international quality standards to local needs, the best of both worlds, and take time to understand our clients, providing tailor-made PPE solutions to suit specific industries, so you never have to compromise. Our experts provide on-site safety evaluations and training, and we have advanced training facilities around the country. Our 45,000 square meter warehouse has a vast range of ready-to-wear PPE, with an excess of 120 million PPE items and 1 million workwear garments in stock at any given moment. We're ready to ship both in quantity and quality worldwide, helping you avoid unnecessary downtime. We are constantly developing innovative solutions to meet the ever-changing needs of our clients. Dromex Global is our state-of-the-art manufacturing facility and is the first of its kind in Africa, producing up to 400,000 garments per month, while providing employment for almost 1,000 members of the local community. Our commitment to local job creation brings opportunities and upliftment to the communities in which we operate. At Dromex, we believe that all employees in any work environment are entitled to maximum safety protection, and that employers should not have to compromise on the quality of the PPE products they provide their staff. In any environment or any industry, Dromex protects.
Right, we believe no safety, no Dromex. This next slide over here pertains to global quality standards. In order to ensure complete credibility and compliance, we carefully select our suppliers, which enabled us to supply internationally certified products from high-quality accredited suppliers all over the world. ISO standard, you're all familiar with that. Neels touched on that a bit earlier. The other standard on there is the sorry, I need to just get to the next slide. Yeah. The EN standard CE and IEC, those pertain to standards on the products that are relevant for the European Union. Kinetrics, that refers to a testing laboratory in Canada, where they do garment integrity tests of an arc flash garment. The garments are put on a mannequin, and an arc flash is simulated, and the integrity of the garment is then evaluated. UL for Underwriters Laboratory, that's again in the US as well, where they do a NFPA 2112 burn test on fabric. ATEX is a European testing facility, also linked in with the CE and EA mark. SABS approval, you guys are all aware of SABS, the SANS approvals on many products that are required. On the factory that you saw in the video, we have a 434 permit, which is on all our garments that are made there. They're all SABS 434 compliant. ESTM, that stands for American Standards and Testing Methods. A lot of the fabrics that are used in some of our specialized arc flash protection have to comply with not only the European, South African, but also the American and Canadian standards. NFPA, National Fire Prevention Association. I mentioned earlier a test called NFPA 2112, which is for flame retardancy. And then IEC and EN, I touched on earlier, referred to the European standards and CE marks. Stock availability, you saw earlier in the video a brief shot of our warehouse. In today's industry and climate, employees need to ensure that their workers are fully protected at all times. This means being able to supply and receive PPE with a sense of urgency and priority. You know, the days of waiting 6 weeks for lead times creates headaches and an inconvenience for everybody. It's vital to get the products on site and to the people on time. Holding such a large inventory of stock enables us to ensure that as a PPE professional supplier and the safety officers never have to wait to get the product to the workers. This also creates an opportunity for us to add real value for money in the PPE because we hold such a vast range of stock. It gives us a lot of buying power, etc. Our products are available through a large group of distributors throughout Southern Africa, throughout the world, and in Africa. We have head offices in Durban, as Neels touched on, with our warehouse over here. We have an office and a training facility in Cape Town and one in Johannesburg, and numerous distributors throughout the country where the products are available from. Innovation. This is a vital part of our business. The old way was once that one size fits all approach, where you would have one glove for all applications, or one overall for all environments, or one mask for all conditions. This is simply not how it works anymore. As we all know, the market has shifted to a more specialized approach, are evaluated, and it's vital that you provide the right PPE to enable that person to do that job as efficiently and as safely as possible. This is where one of the services that we'd like to talk about this morning, where Dromex has an added value service where we do PPE advice, training, and assessment. So what this involves is our job as safety professionals is to better understand the working environment and the worlds that each of the workers work in and are faced with every day. And the way that we do this is the form of a PPE assessment. With a vast amount of experience and different environments and different PPE products, we're able to assist with the selection of the right PPE to make sure that your employees are protected at a maximum level. What we do as well is we actually issue a certificate of training once the company's gone through the PPE assessment and we've had the opportunity to train the end users and the safety practitioners in the correct use and application of the PPE. You know, be it the respirators that are used for specific applications, gloves, etc., whatever that particular product is, hearing protection, eye and face protection, workwear, the standards of the workwear, be it chemical, be it fire retardant, be it arc flash, the correct sizing of the product, how important it is to make sure that the correct care and maintenance is adhered to, how it's laundered, how it's looked after. And then you get your specialized PPE. I touched on arc protection. Arc protection is a very, very dangerous element. You know, there's been some incidents in the news lately. I'm sure you guys have heard. Unfortunately, there's been some fatalities with arc flashes, substations. Very, very dangerous environment. vital that the right risk assessment is done and the right PPE is used in those environments, and that the people are trained how to use it, when to use it, etc. On the right there, you see the certificate I made mention of, where we would then issue that to all the people that were involved in the training, so forth, and make sure that that they have that on record. Yeah. Okay, the importance of the PPE assessment. That document, as you can see, covers, it's broken down into eye hazards, head and neck and face, foot hazards, etc. So we go through each individual product and we would evaluate the risks that are faced there and make sure that the right product is allocated for that particular form of protection. Okay, the first step, inform the affected employees of the process. Okay, this is vital. We need to get buy-in from the workers and ensure that the affected workers from each area that are being assessed should be actively involved in the process. It is their perspective that we have to take into account and understand to truly recommend the right PPE and ensure that it's correct fit and that the function for the task they are working in is addressed. It's important to discuss the reasons for the assessment to the workers and the safety officers and the procedures that are used to evaluate what we're going to be recommending. You should review all the job procedures, potential hazards, and the PPE that's currently used. This will give you a better holistic view and enable you to identify the correct solutions. Step 2, to review the data available. Go through all existing reports of work-related injuries or incidents that might have occurred or illnesses that the people are facing. If there's a situation where people have a breathing problem or illness, make sure you're aware of it. Any near miss events or any reported safety concerns. This type of information is the source of data that can provide clarity and help with assessment and ensuring that you provide the correct protection. Step 3, conduct a thorough walkthrough assessment. Okay, the purpose of the walkthrough assessment is to identify the causes of the hazard and the risks that are exposed to the workers. Observe the following when you're walking through: the layout of the workplace, the location of the employees, work operations, the hazards they faced, the potential risks, and where is the PPE currently being used, and what type is it used, and what is the reason that it's been used. In using the form that I showed earlier, where it broke down into eye protection, hearing protection, respiratory protection, etc., identify the specific body part that you need to protect. Is it a risk of impact, for example, falling objects or flying objects in the area? Is there a risk of penetration, sharp objects piercing a glove, or penetration from a cut piece of glass through the foot? In the bottling plants and Coca-Cola places, SA breweries, as we know, many of these companies insist on a midsole to prevent penetration coming through broken bottles, nails, etc. Molten metal splash. Is it an area where there's welding being done, furnace operations, etc., where there's a risk of molten metal splash? Chemical exposure. Is there a risk of inhalation, ingestion, skin contact, eye contact with a chemical? Be aware of chemical risks. Temperatures. Is there extreme heat, extreme cold? These are all factors that can take into account. Dust, flying debris created by grinding or chipping or sanding. We obviously use their face shields if necessary, etc. Fall and slip risks. Radiation. What they mean there is ultraviolet light, infrared light that may be emitted by welding, cutting and brazing operations or furnace operations. Noise, mechanical noise, mechanical rooms, machine rooms, etc. We're all aware of the need for hearing protection and the noise levels, etc. And then lastly, I'll touch on it again, electrical, the risk of arc flash or electrocution. Okay. Step 4, identify the correct and appropriate PPE. It all ties back into the walkthrough, the discussion with the workers, all that kind of stuff. After considering and or planning for all other safety risks in that area, so that provides the maximum protection to protect the employees from the dangers presented and eliminate any risks. Use that same form that you saw earlier. You can tick the appropriate boxes, mark off there what you've allocated and what's the right form of PPE to use. Step 5, make the document accessible to all the relevant departments. Once it's completed, signed and dated, store the form either electronically or with a hard copy in a location that's easily accessible to employees, safety practitioners, and inspectors. You've got it on record, you've done the walkthrough, you've done the assessment. Make sure that you store the relevant findings and documents correctly. Step 6, revise the safety protocol. Update departmental safety protocols with a new modified PPE, for example, from an FFP2 to an FFP3, or a mask with a valve, or you've upgraded the workwear. Make sure you put the latest specifications of what the minimum standard is for your PPE in the file and keep it up to date. Reassess the workplace as necessary. This is achieved by identifying and evaluating any new processes or new equipment that's put in an area. Once you've done the assessment, if something's changed or you've changed the protocol in that area or there's a new machine included there, go through the process again and make sure it's updated. Keep record of all accident records and just reevaluate the suitability of the previously selected PPE. This is a brief section that we'll go into now. Just a quick update on some of the new products that we've introduced. There's a new hard hat that we're making locally in South Africa. It's a polypropylene copolymer hard, very light and very strong material that's used for hard hats. It's got retractable ventilation holes on the top of the hard hat, which makes it a lot cooler in hot environments. You can also obviously close those ventilation holes. 2-point adjustable webbing polyester chin strap that comes standard with the hard hat, securing the hard hat at all times. 8-point suspension system, which absorbs and enables maximum distribution and shock absorption. Very comfortable suspension system. It's been attested for electrical isolation up to 2000 volts. Complies with all the latest, obviously, SABS and SANS requirements, 1397. The SANS is for the local market. It has the necessary European and American standards for export and up into Africa. Some of the companies in Africa are owned by large mining groups that head offices are in the USA or Europe. Sometimes they want an international standard in that case. We can provide you with all that certification. Mining focused, it's available with a cap lamp as well. And we have the mining requirements as well and CE approval on this product. Our next item that we'd like to mention is, you saw in the video our factory up in Hammersdale, where we have over 1,000 employees employed. That factory is a fourth, and we are pleased to announce a new product that we're making there. It's a 2-tone 6535 Conti suit. It's a SABS 434 cut, so it's a very generous cut. Triple stitched all over the garment. All the bar tack and stress points are triple stitched in bar tack for extra durability. Very comfortable and durable fabric. The only limitation would be it's not to be used in an area where there would be a fire risk, obviously, or a chemical risk. But for general workwear, it's ideal. A big target market is the agricultural market, hence the 2-tone. It seems to be popular with a lot of guys in that segment. These are the 2-tone options. There's that khaki and olive, as you saw earlier, and then there's a navy and gray variation. It's a full suite of colors available: black, gray, emerald, navy, khaki, olive green, and orange. They're available in the form of a jacket to be bought separately, or a trouser, or as a Conti suit. So it gives you the flexibility that if you have a different size chest, you can go for a bigger jacket or smaller jacket, etc. So very popular product, generous cut and well priced as well. Plenty of stock available to support the requirements. talk about is some new footwear we've brought out. And with that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Barry Oates, who's our footwear specialist. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Just enter to flip this on. All right, morning everybody. Obviously, Dromex, we do a lot of different styles of PPE, and we're very excited now just to broaden our sort of reach into the footwear section. So we brought out a few new products quickly with you. So the Alteco safety boot we already have out. That's your sort of mid-entry, genuine leather, double polyurethane sole. Very good boot, comfort, wide fitting. And we also put a nice memory foam PU insock inside there. So we've had very good acceptance of this boot. And we're just going to further go through a few more styles just to add to our range. All right, the Alteco safety shoe, we're going to be bringing that out in the next couple of months, possibly October. It's just a shoe that couples nicely with the Alteco boot. Same thing, double density PU, full genuine leather upper, very nice comfort, nice fit. All right, the Alteco Plus, this we've just launched recently in the last sort of 2 weeks. The Alteco Plus is just a further adaptation on the Alteco, the normal Alteco boot, but what we've done here is we've brought it up to an S3, which is a level ahead of your normal standard S1 boot classification. So for the S3, we added in a steel midsole, which gives you protection from any sort of penetration from the bottom through the sole. We've also used the treated leather, which basically has passed a higher sort of water resistant test. So a lot of people refer to an S3 more as an outdoor boot as opposed to an S1 boot. Same thing, the memory sole, PU sole insock that goes inside there. So this is very much a more durable boot, much harder working boot, and I believe this will do very well. All right, just a couple of the different features that go into our Alteco boot. Pretty much everything that I've gone through. Basically just to dissipate water, liquids, things like that. All of our boots have got a SRC rating for slip resistance. This is the highest sort of test for slip resistance, making them very suitable for any sort of conditions. All right. We bought in a ladies' boot called the Ladies Nabushla boot. This is just to add to the range and basically extend the range, just to have an offering as well for all the ladies out there. Same thing, SRC rating on your slip, on your sole. We've put a non-composite toe cap in here, and we've tried to make it a non-metal boot, just to give us a couple of extra options in our range and to cover a few more aspects. We didn't want to make our range too big, so it will be well accepted and will cover most industries and requirements in those industries. All right, and then the Chelsea boot. Obviously, the growth of the Chelsea boot in this country has been phenomenal. A lot of people have moved from your lace-ups to your Chelsea boot. So here we've tried to bring out something that's fashionable, but very versatile as well. We've gone for a crazy horse leather, which is a good quality leather. Liquids dissipate off it a lot faster, and thus making it more durable and suitable in sort of wet weather. Same thing, we've got the Alteco sole in there, double density polyurethane, the insock, and we believe it's going to be a very good boot out in the market. All right, this is in sock that we've come out with. It's a polyurethane with a memory foam on top. Very, very comfortable, and we will be selling these individually as well, packaged and selling it out to the market. This, I believe, a lot of the manufacturers sometimes miss out on, but the comfort of the safety boots generally, it supports the foot, it makes the foot sit nicely in the boot. The guys are working for long hours, so it's a very essential part of the footwear. It cuts down on any friction, which and things like that, and any potential injuries that might happen through the wear of a safety boot on somebody's foot. So as far as the footwear goes, we're very excited about it. It's not a space that we've really been in, but we believe that these initial new products, we believe that we are going to fast move into the space that the other manufacturers in this space. I do invite all of you, or any of you, please come over to our table, have a look at the footwear, any questions that we can answer, or just you want to have a chit chat about safety footwear, please feel free. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Dromex for that update, and also please convey our thanks to Stel, the CEO of Dromex, for the kind sponsorship that we get from you guys as well. Really appreciate it. We got two of our council board members here today. Special welcome to our president that's here today, Dr. Sanjay Munu, as well as our vice president, Harold Gaze. You can give them a round of applause as well. Thank you, guys. Right, we move on to our second product update. Welcome the National Sales and Distribution Manager of Uvex, Jared Swanepoel.
All right. Good morning. Morning, everybody. Morning, everybody. It's really good to be here. And Neels, as always, you have really arranged an awesome event. It's always done and executed so perfectly. So to Neels and team at Saiosh, thanks again. You know, when you've got to double mic up, you know, it's a really smart event. This is the first for me, so I hope I do it all right. And then, yeah, the venue is really great as well. Coming from Centurion, I think I haven't seen a green blade of grass since probably March. So this is something of an oasis, a great event, great venue. Thank you so much for all the efforts and for having us. Yeah, so Uvex Safety, I managed to interact with most of you in the room today. For those of you online who may not know who we are, so Uvex was established 96 years ago. It's a German brand and a fully fledged subsidiary in South Africa for 27 years, with local warehousing down the road here in Durban. And we see ourselves as a leading manufacturer of PPE, top 8, in fact, last year, top 8 globally. So yeah, we hope to build on that. And of course, not just meet standards that have been set globally, but exceed those, surpass them, sometimes fivefold. So really striving to produce premium and high quality product. One benefit we do have is that everything you see with the Uvex logo on is by Uvex or made in Uvex. So from R&D through to interacting with you as end users or industry peers is done by a Uvex employee. So that just gives us a bit of control on development and production and stock, etc. So on the slides, you will see a mask, all right, and not normally the product we lead with as Uvex. We're well known, of course, for eye protection. And over the years, over the last 90 odd years, we have developed, of course, into further product groups, respiratory being one of them. Now, this category in particular has been something of a roller coaster ride in the last few years. I think you can agree. I think with what's happened when it comes to COVID has really turned things on its head. And it's caused a bit of an ocean of confusion. And I think a lot of our distribution partners are overstocked. with product they can't even tell themselves quite where it came from. And I think pre to COVID, the standards and the supply in the industrial market was pretty stable. We had the EN and the SABS standard, the adopted standard, in place, and product pretty well controlled by the NRCS. Okay, of course, COVID came, and with the origin of COVID in China came a lot of product. I think the amount of production, particularly in your face or in your face shields and your masks, your dust masks or your respiratory products, more than quadrupled overnight. And all of a sudden, we found ourselves in a position where even the factories couldn't keep up, which led to global shortages in raw materials, which meant there was a bit of a process where you got to kind of bid on stock and pricing went up. There were some cases of price gouging going on. And these global shortages resulted in stock being prioritized. So whether it was for a particular sector like healthcare or government in the countries where this product was being manufactured, getting your hands on proper product, quality product that meets. So at that point in time, local government made the decision to scrap the face shields and to go for masks only after a bit of research. But that did mean there was a shortage, of course, in product and a high demand for that one particular product range. So that led to a situation where there was a temporary certification offered to both importers and manufacturers, and the number of applications were astounding. All of a sudden, everyone was manufacturing masks, and of course, everything goes. So whether it was a simple sheet of fabric or a modified Coke bottle, it was considered a face covering of sorts and a mask, and it was accepted for sale and legal. Okay, and when, of course, the state was meant to stop, it hasn't. Okay, so there's still a gray area of confusion on the legalities around the product we find on the shelves. And there's still a lot of stock floating around that doesn't meet the standards. Now, your N95 and KN95 is obviously the new kids on the block. And I'll say new kids on the block because almost overnight, we accepted these products as the go-to products, the house name, let's say. When it came to a mask, it was N95. No one really knew what that meant, but it was accepted because of the allowances or the temporary certificates being offered. Now, in South African industry, of course, it's the EN standard that we refer to, the SABS adoption of that EN standard, which actually warrants N95 and KN95 illegal. So we still sit in a position where that's kind of the go-to product, yet it's not really general knowledge to the market. And enforcing it in a time like this is obviously mission impossible. So yeah, we thought, let's swim upstream and let's dive into the one product category that everyone sees as the biggest nightmare at the moment. And let's launch a new range of masks. So we got around the table and we figured, how do we do this? So of course, the new kids on the blocks, the N95, if I position them there next to the EN on the third column, so your second and fourth column being your N95 and your KN95, on the surface with their 95% filtration, seems all right. However, if you kind of dig into the standard and how everything is tested further down, you start to find why it is that it was the EN standard that was adopted instead of the N95 or the KN95. Okay, almost every single test you can do, it falls short. All right, so we decided let's launch a new product and let's do it properly. Let's do it with the correct local valid standards, and let's put it on the mask. Let's not do it in China where we can't control supply. Let's do it here in South Africa where we can own the development, we can own the quality, and we can own the stock supply. We also wanted to make a mask that could be a problem solver for a lot of the issues that have come up of late. You'll see the image on the left. We've created a seal around the nose where on the back side of that, if you want to come through to the stand and have a look, it's completely non-porous, completely sealed off, but where it touches as comfortable. And of course, I think we can all relate to that 30-second struggle we had with our masks outside the Pick and Pay. So I think first thing we would do is we'd run into the Pick and Pay and then realize, okay, we don't actually have our mask. We'd go back, and then it would be, because it's hot in the car, you parked in the sun, okay, and you've got your mask and now you're trying to get it on, and it's a bit of a wrestling match. So what we've done is we've made sure that we haven't welded the straps themselves or the headbands themselves, but we've just created a loop so that every head shape can accommodate the mask, and putting it on becomes a lot easier. So instead of just having two small straps, you can create one big strap, get it over the head, okay? And once it's on the face, you could then pull the second strap and you can have a bit of room to play with. So not only is it easier to put on, but a lot better. It's not a predetermined dimension. It's something that you could fit to your own head size. All right, we also decided to go with the 360-degree exhalation valve. A few questions about that actually this morning. So the valve is a one-way valve for the entire purpose just of releasing humidity from the breath, from the exhalation. Okay, it cannot air cannot come inward through the mask through the valve. It's a one-way valve, and what that does is to the mask. The second thing is it prevents the saturation of the filtration media, meaning you breathe easier for longer and stay cooler and more comfortable for longer. Okay, we've also gone for a pre-molded shape that fits the nose area a lot better with the adjustable clips. And then we've also gone for soft materials everywhere that it touches the skin. Okay. So this range, call us crazy or stupid, we believe is going to do really well. We've tried to focus on the basics and get them right. Because it's locally made, it's reasonably priced, and we've got the full range of P2 through to P2 valve with activated carbon layer for your nuisance odors, as well as your FFP3 valve for your really high filtration requirements. Something quite nice about the mask is we pre-mold the outer and inner construction without the filter medium on the inside. So we don't to the heat and pressure that all other masks are exposed to. And of course, that heat and pressure kind of closes off the breathability of the filter medium on the inside. So your breathing resistance is exceptionally high for longer. And then once we bring the components together, we ultrasonically weld it on the outside so it all stays in place. Okay. So that's the Comfort Air range, and we are handing out some samples. Some of you already got some boxes. So anyone who currently uses one of these variants in their workplace, please feel free to come through and visit us. We'll ask for your information in exchange for a box to test, and we hope to get some good feedback. All right. Last time you saw me, we did do a prize giveaway for everyone who interacted with us. So I'd like to announce that winner today. Our previous topic was sustainability. And out of sustainability, one of our products on the sports side is it's a spectacle that is made entirely from recycled fish nets, which usually causes a lot of trouble out in the ocean, of course. So recycled waste and fish nets from the ocean is used to manufacture this product. And we had quite a few entrants, so thank you everybody, but there can only be one winner. So I don't know if Sabrina de Klerk is in the building. We didn't see her on the register, so if not, Sabrina, I see, is based in KZN at, I think it's Bidvest Bulk Connections, or it's Sabrina. Okay, so my colleague here in KZN will make sure we get it out to Sabrina, so well done to Sabrina. And for the rest of you that had to endure a minute of somebody else winning, we will give you an opportunity to also win. So as I mentioned, if you are in the industrial space using, take out your phones now and scan this QR code. And yes, there's a few doing it. Okay. So this will take you to an online form to just put in your details, and then we'll make contact with you to get Are you taking photos of me now or the? Okay, so, oh, that's good. That's a good response. So the KZN is really tech savvy. So once you fill out that form, we'll get your information and we'll make contact and come out to you and bring you some samples to test. Okay. To not discriminate against those that are not so tech savvy, there's my email address and make it a bit easier for you. You can also just send me an email with your information and we can take it from there. So as mentioned, the previous topic was sustainability. And yeah, this topic always gets me thinking about my children. I've got a 2- and a 4-year-old. They are naughty as hell. They drive me mad. So help us if that is the future. No, I'm kidding. I think we're in good hands. I think a lot of the change we see around us today is good. But if I look around the room, like me, most of us are probably in the second half of our innings. So everything we're doing today is really for the generation of tomorrow. And although my kids are naughty, I can't criticize their intent. You know, kids are really pure and really good down in their core. And I think us as adults are perhaps sometimes guilty on the intent side. We've obviously got deadlines, we've got targets to hit. And so, you know, we don't always take a step back and think about our impact on the environment around us. And that's where our kids really take the lead, I suppose. So you see, when we arrive in this world, we arrive without agenda. We're amazed by everything around us. We come into the picture as one with nature, and we live entirely in the moment. We play in the mud, and we love every single living creature. It's like we're working in the same team towards one goal of goodness. But then something changes. We grow up and we enter the big, scary world that we know as adults. We need to get a job. We need to climb in our car and drive to that job, probably to manufacture some sort of a product. And then we need to sell that product. And every step in between is demanding a hell of a lot from our environment, from our resources, and we're releasing a lot of greenhouse gases into our ozone. This is not new. In fact, this started with the big industrial revolution many, many years ago. The catalyst of the greatest change that our world will ever see. Temperatures have risen to a scary level, and CO2, which has been stable for many, many years, has all of a sudden spiraled out of control. All of this triggering climate change and the erratic weather conditions that we're experiencing today. Australia's felt fires, I think even here in KZN with the floods, we can see that it's happening all around us all the time. If this is where we are today, where exactly are we headed? We've become a bit distant from our first love. We've cut down nearly 3 trillion trees, and we've lost in that about 31% of our natural wilderness. This replacing it with plastic mountains of islands of disease-riddled waste. We must admit, the future looks a bit gloomy. But maybe it's not all lost. Maybe there's something that we can do about it. You see, if man could just go back to its childish ways, and if we could come together and sit around the same tent, we've seen it's possible. Remember the very first announcements of the global lockdown. We saw marine life in now crystal clear canals in Venice. Wild animals were fighting for their place. The natural world was sending us a message. We can indeed fight back. Perhaps we can turn back the hands of time. Can we fight back for in what we once had so much pride? Well, at Uvex, we strongly believe that we can. And I said it in the last one as well, but for a moment I definitely felt again like David Attenborough there. Notes to refer to though, because he does a much better job of it. And yeah, it is a gloomy picture looking into the future with our current trajectory. And I think the biggest culprit, if we're honest, is definitely the human race. If we look at the population stats, and I think this is just 84 years, so one lifetime, we've grown tremendously. 5.5 billion people, in fact, that's 240%. Okay, and CO2 as well has climbed 50% in that same time period. Okay, trending the other direction is our natural wilderness. As I mentioned, half the world's forests have been removed, and of course that's it's an exponential effect because forests are what we rely on for oxygen as well. So the fewer oxygen and the more CO2, the harder it gets to fight back. Just some more facts. One garbage truck load of plastic is dumped into the ocean every minute. So that's 1,440 loads per day and over 500,000 loads a year. Pollution is in fact the largest cause of death in the world today. That's approximately 9 million deaths, which trumps both AIDS and malaria combined. And since the start of COVID, obviously our product mix has changed a bit more to your disposable mix instead of your reusable type PPE, especially in the healthcare sector. So, you know, as a manufacturer of PPEs, you know, what are we doing to either aid the problem or fix the problem? And if you look at a company such as Uvex, if we put ourselves under the spotlight, if you look at one construction worker on a site, he needs a helmet, he needs a spectacle, a dust mask, earplugs, he needs some workwear, of course, thank goodness, shoes, a pair of gloves, and one worker's PPE relates to about 22 kilograms of waste per year if you go through a normal replacement pattern. So we've allocated, for example, one helmet per year, 3 spectacles per year. Obviously, your dust masks is a lot higher than that. Your earplugs, 1 per month. So we've looked at your average consumption and looked at one person's impact on the environment. If you look at a company of 100 people, there was one person filled out a form today saying we're a company of 100. So your company in particular, that's 2.2 tons of waste and 16 cubic meters of waste of PPE per year. If you look at our automotive sector, that's roughly 400,000 people working. You're looking at 9,000 tons and 66,000 square meters of waste. Okay, that's equivalent to 4,500 Polo Vivos. And if you look at the space that needs to occupy is 2,000 20-foot containers. Okay, so if you stack those on top of each other, we're looking at more than 6. Who knows the Burj Khalifa? Tallest building in the world in Dubai. Have you been to the top of it? Okay, is one thing. But if you stack those containers one on top of the next, you're looking at more than 6 Burj Khalifas. That's every year, one sector, one country. Okay. Now, there's a lot of information at the moment about sustainability. It's a hot topic. Unfortunately, there's not one governing credible body that kind of is the safety net for us all to abide by, and the information on the net can get quite confusing. Of course, with the help of Google AdWords, whoever spends the most money will be the first ones found as well. So you really got to sift through it to identify what can we do, what can we adhere to, what are the right standards. And to be practical, each company really just needs to look inward and make small change on a daily basis. Really small things that can help the bigger picture. It's that that scenario of the shellfish on the beach, you know, throwing one back in and there's a million still left on the beach. If we all adopt that thinking, the world, of course, would be a much different place. So at Uvex, we look at 3 different pillars: ecologically, socially, and economically. Each and every single one, we are reporting on what we're doing on a daily basis, and we look at our impact on the environment. And I'm not going to bore you with all the stats, but for those tech-savvy people, you're welcome to go and check it out. Every single thing we do on a daily basis is making a massive difference in our production and getting PPE into industry in a much more responsible way. Just one product in particular, because of course, normally when it comes to sustainable products, there's a bit of a premium cost attached to it. The next product I'd like to show a video on is actually within our range, sold by price, one of the cheapest spectacles you can buy. And I'll let the video do the talking on the product features. I was premature. I'm going to spend 1 more minute on this product. Okay, so it's one production line which reduces our CO2 by 50%. Okay, we bulk package the product again, reducing the weight of the packaging by 50%, and I'll show you practically what that looks like. It's a single piece of material, no hinges, no rubbers, no sidearms, it's one mold, one product. Everything considered being one production site reduces the CO2 by 98%, and some other methods aiding the cause, just to show you what the packaging looks like. So on your left-hand side, you can see the packaging of the sustainable product, and on the right-hand side, you've got your typical eyewear packaged 5 in a box, and you can see the impact of how much waste is reduced with this product. Now I shall play you a video. Okay, so for years we've played with the idea of how do we get into the recycling side of our PPE, because it's different materials. You can't just throw it into the plastic bin because it's got metal screws or hinges or whatever the case. So but the beauty of that product is it's as simple as that. It's easy to recycle and become, I don't know, next week, maybe someone's floor mat or something like that. I'm not going to go into too much detail to show you exactly and practically what you're doing on every single product because of time allocation, but just for an example, a lot of our components throughout our range on the sustainable side is manufactured from recycled collected waste like your PET bottles. We've got a new glove called the Bamboo Twin Flex, which is a high cut protection glove, which is made in a CO2 neutral production facility, being made with bamboo, which is 44% of the product, which is a renewable material. Also, fun fact, the most skin-friendly material most skin-friendly material in the glove market. And then it's paper wrapped packaging. So 10 pairs of glove requires only those 2 little reams of paper. Okay. We've got a helmet, also SABS approved and DMR approved for use here in South Africa in the mining sector, being made from recycled material and from sugarcane, strangely. Okay, workwear, which we don't sell in South Africa as yet, but just so you're aware, this workwear is a product that's entirely recyclable, or let's say a cradle to grave is no longer where it stopped, it's cradle to cradle. So this product can be worn for a normal lifespan and then thrown into your compost patch and come out the next week as a carrot. It's entirely degrades down into a renewable material as well. On the footwear side, again, not a product range we've launched locally in South Africa, but again, majority of the components manufactured from. So there's really a lot being done by Uvex globally. Our earplugs, I'm sure many of you in the room would be using Uvex earplugs. So this is our production site in Sweden. Okay, and it's the only PPE production site in the world to fulfill ISO 26000, which is a sustainability ISO standard. And this factory requires less than a champagne glass of water to manufacture over 1,000 earplugs. Okay, so if we apply this type of math to your, let's say, your PPE range of the future. Okay, so if we look at our examples that we had up, where we had certain amount of waste, we can reduce this figure down by 72%. Okay, that means we go polos to just 2,300. That's a reduction, a massive reduction of 6,100 polos. Okay, and we can reduce the 2,000 containers down to 560, which is well less than 2 Burj Khalifas. So practically, really changing the impact that PPE is having on the environment. And yeah, again, I just want to thank everyone for your time. If there's anything that stood out, please reach out to us. You have got our contact details. I also want to ask my colleague, Raki, to just wave a hand there. Raki is our sales manager for KZN. So you may be familiar with her. If you're not, she is the face of Uvex. It's a lot better face than mine for KZN. So yeah, please make contact with us if anything stood out. And thanks again for your time, and thanks to you, Neels.
about introduction to Saiosh members, but just briefly, without reading his full CV, Raynard was, in fact, he was, as a youngster, he stayed in Durban. He's actually a Durbanite. His schooling was, high school was in a very posh school in Victoria Boys High. A lot of famous people come from that school, including Raynard, Looch. Raynard obviously obtained his LLB even before I was born. He worked for the state. He was appointed as the prosecutor for a very interesting court back then, which sadly we don't have anymore. It was the OHS court, the Occupational Health and Safety Court, which primarily did the court cases against employers for mining, but also Occupational Health and Safety Act. So they're not very afraid how to prosecute employers in terms of the then was Act and the Mine Health and Safety Act. And I think it was about 86, Raynard, when he said, okay, this is the should be making the money, and I'm going to start defending the employers because I know exactly what the loopholes are in the systems. And ever since then, Raynard has been obviously up to date with legislation, and we also wrote Raynard into the moderator of the OHS Legal Advice Forum, and more importantly, played a major role, as you'll see today, in the technical committee that we formed to submit the comments to the Department of Employment and Labour on the OHS draft bill. And with the topic back to the drawing board, the OHS draft bill, please give a warm welcome live to Advocate Raynard Looch.
Thank you. Can I speak now and everybody can hear me? Okay. No, thanks, Neels, for that lovely, intimidating introduction. Yeah, I've got to live up to everything you say now. And Murphy's Law, I'll go all pear-shaped. I'm already now confused whether I'm wearing my dark glasses or my new prescription tinted glasses. And I thought it's going to be a cool look, you know, talking with sunglasses on. But folks, I'm going to be very naughty today. I've combined a presentation by a former chief inspector on the draft bill with the latest presentation by the current new chief inspector on the draft bill, on other things too, but I'm going to focus on the draft bill. And then at the end, I'm going to test you all. And I'm going to discuss this, and they promised us that. You'll see it on the slides. Does it live up to what they say? And the jury is out until then, and I want to hear from you. And then I'll say some very nasty stuff about the bill right at the end, so you can see where I'm going already. As Neil said, I sat on the Saiosh Technical Committee on the draft OHS Amendment Bill 2020, I think it's called. That tell you. It tells you that we're not getting a brand new piece of legislation. Only certain provisions will be amended. And as you will see, it's to align it with the Constitution and to be more transparent and to do all these things. And whether they've done that or not, I'll leave up to you at the end of the day. I also served on the Saiosh Technical Committee for the draft Mine Health and Safety Amendment Bill 2002. And I have the same comments to make basically about that particular piece of legislation as well. Yeah, so let's see that I don't screw up. Neels has already told me, don't press this button, press that button, don't do this, don't do that. So, you know, here I am totally stressed which button I must press. But I think I should get it right. So this is now, the first port is the previous chief inspector. I think he resigned in February. And I've known him forever. He was an API inspector when I was prosecuting in what was called the mining court, based in Johannesburg with jurisdiction for the former Transvaal. So all those provinces were now Northwest, Mpumalanga, it's a funny jurisdiction. Not all parts of Gauteng falls within the old Witwatersrand local division of the High Court, now Gauteng South High Court. Some parts like Brakpan will now be Gauteng North High Court, you know, so it's a funny little jurisdiction. And we were 6 dedicated prosecutors. We had a 96% conviction rate. We cheat a little. If you pay an admission of guilt, then it's a conviction as far as we're concerned. And we were very busy. And what has happened over the years, the courts have been dissolved, many of them. And I think there's one court, and abandoned completely. There's one remaining little court with a few prosecutors in Pretoria, and I don't think they really even function. So you don't read about prosecutions ever on OHS matters. You read about incidents, Tongaat mole collapses, the Freightmax Imperial Group, flammable store collapses. I was involved in that matter. Greyston Bridge collapses. Paul print fire burns 11 people to death. But what? There's no appetite for these type of cases. So let's take a look at the background. This is now the previous chief inspectors. Some of these slides have been selective. He says we're going to introduce the OHS Amendment Bill. The proposed amendments became necessary to ensure consistency with the spirit and provision of the Constitution. Remember that, folks. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. That's the current OHS Act, 1993 piece of legislation. Now, there have been regulations amended and repealed and so on, but the bulk of the Act, sections 1 to 50, I think it is, they preceded the Constitution by 3 years, the interim Constitution. Unlike the Mine Health and Safety Act, which is a 1996 piece of legislation, aligned with the Constitution, a product of NEDLAC, consultation and negotiation. So he says the right to life. Okay, that's in the Constitution. We have no issue with that. Human dignity, I have a problem with that, and I will tell you why. I think there's some undignified provisions in the current Act, as well as they haven't addressed it in the draft bill. Access to information, I put the red in there, by the way, is basically a joke. We still get no information. And I'll tell you about that as well. Neels has warned me not to say too much at the beginning, because I tend to, use my agenda to give the entire workshop, and then I'm on slide 2-3 hours later. Lawful, reasonably, and procedurally fair administrative decision-making. I put that in red for a reason. You guys be the jury at the end of the day. Is to align the Act with the Constitution. I said it before, other employment laws, I've got no either, and obviously no issues with that. Review and strengthen the enforcement provisions. Yes, they're going to do it. Ensure that the legislation is in line with the current international and local national practice as far as legislation is concerned. Simplify the administrative system for the issuing of fines. Okay, there we come, like the Mine Health and Safety Act, they want to introduce fines. You pay a fine, you don't go to court. Hey, shorten the enforcement procedures, reinforce the offenses and penalties. We'll get to that. The empowerment of a council to play a major role in advising the minister on listed work. Those of you who know the Act, we've had this concept of listed work. I think it is sections 11 and 12. Never been promulgated. And now they've continued with this listed work, but since 1993, we've had this concept. It used to be called risk work, risikowerk, when you still had the Afrikaans versions. The empowerment of employees to leave a dangerous workplace.
Can I ask you to present from this side? We need closer to the.
Oh, okay.
You can present from here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't like to be a slave to that thing. This is very important, folks. The empowerment of employees to leave a dangerous workplace when their health and safety are in danger without any fear of victimization. But folks, remember this one. Remember how it was trumpeted. Any of you ever seen DL's presentations on the bill, which I've now copied? We're going to introduce the right to leave a dangerous workplace. It exists in the Mine Health and Safety Act. In fact, in 1981, I think it was, the ILO, the International Labour Organization's Convention on Occupational Health and Safety, one of the provisions is that workers have the right to leave a dangerous workplace. That's been there since the 80s. Incorporated in 1996 in the Mine Health and Safety Act, and you guys know from COVID, it was introduced with one of the directions, I think they call them. We keep calling them directives. One of the DEL, Department of Health, incidentally, not DE and a little OL, so it makes it easier to type. And they introduced the right to, for a worker to leave a workplace where they felt there's not adequate protection against COVID. So it was introduced already then. And we'll see what happens with the bill. And then Section 16.2, contentious aspect. It is contentious, and I'll tell you why. The response to delegate duties in writing and become accountable for any duties that have been delegated. That's nothing new. The CEO has always been potentially accountable, isn't it? The word delegate, I'll tell you about it, but legal. Big organizations matching their management structure to Section 16, managers and supervisors have a specific function and are required to manage health and safety. Now remember this too, folks. The former chief inspector, whose slideshow this is, said, we want to actually look at managers, middle managers, etc., down to supervisors and give them a role. And I want to ask you at the end of the day, does the bill give them a role? And then I will advertise our Saiosh Technical Committee's proposals. We made a big proposal, which we're very happy about, to cover managers and supervisors. I don't want to give away my old show. I'm always guilty of doing that. So if you're in the dark, it'll make sense towards it. What is the purpose of Section 16? We all know what it is. The CEO has the duty of ensuring the company, corporate body complies with the Act and can provide and assign one level of normally senior people directly reports, the direct reports of the CEO, and that's where it ends. Then there's a vacuum, which I'll cover. But he said, no, we're going to cover this. Employees' right to leave a dangerous workplace. Did I go one forward? No, I didn't. He's got it on twice. Let's go back. Why is this one stuck? Proposed. Right to leave a dangerous workplace. Employee has the right to leave a dangerous workplace when circumstances arise at that workplace which, with reasonable justification, appear to the employee to pose a serious danger to the health and safety of that employee, or health and safety rep responsible for that workplace directs that employee to leave a dangerous workplace. I shouldn't have put that in there because I'm giving away too much. Proposed changes, offenses and penalties, the revision and strengthening of enforcement provisions, simplification of administrative system for issuing fines, empowers the inspector to issue administrative fines. We'll come to that. The penalties have been substantially increased. Reinforcement of the offenses and penalties as a deterrent to other employers. The alignment of the period of appeal with other employment laws. You know, any decision of an inspector, you can appeal it. There's provision currently in the Act for that. The employers are given the right to appeal the decision of the Chief Inspector in compliance with the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act. I put it in red. I want to ask you at the end of the day, are we complying with the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act? way forward, when the bill is signed by the president, it's not going to be soon, folks. This thing is going to go, and we predict another set of a draft amendment bill will come out because it's so badly written. It really needs to be written again. And so don't expect anything soon. Further workshops are planned, and we did get a workshop now at the Gallagher Estates annual conference. The current Chief Inspector, Pumi Mapa, gave a presentation as well. I've selectively taken out a few slides. Vision and mandate of the department, constitutional mandate, objectives of the IES branch. What does that stand for again? Inspection Enforcement Service. You can see my brain, it's gone already. Functions of the IES branch, and I've underlined that myself. Occupational health and safety amendment bill. The OHS management system in the organization, the status of compliance currently, megabits inspections. I'm not going to cover that in my own presentation. So he's got here 37A, inspector's power to recommend fines. If you look at the draft bill, it's actually 37B. So someone's not doing their homework. And it's entitled the inspector's powers to impose fines. So what does that say to us now? This is now the latest presentation from the Department of Employment and Labor. And that's really, it's differing from the draft. And that was published for comment, that's supposed to be promulgated into law. So they're already backtracking. And what they say in the current, in this proposal is that an inspector may make a recommendation in writing that a fine be imposed on an employer in terms of section 37A, it should be, if the employer contravenes or fails to comply with any provision of the Act. Now that I've already got a problem because there's a schedule at the back of the draft bill which lists the types, the various provisions that could cause a fine to be imposed. Very limited. So it's not any provision, it's only those in the schedule. So the terminology is a bit correct. And of course, in the bill, it says an inspector may impose a fine, not recommend a fine to a specialist. So it's backtracking. It's backtracking already. And then you guys, the show is going to be given out here. It's going to be posted on the website. Hey? Yeah. Is it already on? Oh, and it's recorded on. So I don't have to read too much. It's a bit small, that print there. The inspector concerned may serve a copy of the recommendation on the employer, the Health and Safety Committee, or a rep, or a union. And then there's provision for representations to be made. And the idea is, like the Mine Health and Safety Act, any of you work with that piece of legislation. Also there, an inspector cannot impose a fine. They can only recommend to be imposed. And if you look at our case studies, these fines are challenged annually by mining houses. Some of them are irrational, disproportionate. I mean, you guys in industry will know the infamous prohibition notice, how that thing is abused. You know, an inspector, you have an incident, say you're building a shopping mall that's 3 miles long and a forklift's got a flat tire there or a worn tread, and then they shut the whole building site down. And that is illegal. It's unlawful because there must be a threat to everyone on that construction site before you can impose a prohibition notice, not just that area where the forklift potentially was, or the forklift driver. And you'll see, if you go to our website, there'll be some links where in one particular case, a mining inspector came out in Northwest, and it was indeed, there was a forklift with a worn tread. And you know what it costs to start up a mine again. And they imposed a fine, I think, as well. And they went to court, and the judge said, You've acted so irrationally, inspectors, closing down the mine. It's so disproportionate to any threat that there's posed to people within the mine that I'm going to reject this. So of course, I'm going to uphold the appeal. But the inspector said, you know, claimant, mining house, if you wanted to sue the inspectors in their personal capacities, I would have allowed it. You could sue them for being so irrational and disproportionate. Not just the Department of Mineral and Energies, you can sue these guys personally, but you haven't asked for that. So I'm going to let it go. But the bottom line is in terms of this court case, if an inspector from the Department of Energy with a irrational, disproportionate prohibition notice shuts down the shopping mall when there's a miner issued 2 kilometers away, you can now sue that inspector in his personal capacity or her personal capacity. Because they're there, we've got a case study, we've got a precedent, and I've told them, beware, we can sue you if you carry on. I'm sure you guys have experienced these prohibition notices, you have, where they're just so irrational, disproportionate, and you know, work has to stop until it's revoked, and you lose a lot of money. As I say, it is actually 37A. Specialist inspector may impose a fine. The specialist inspector, after considering the recommendation and any representations in accordance with section 37, now suddenly it's 37A, may disregard the recommendation, impose a fine not exceeding the amount mentioned in Schedule 2, it's 50,000 Rand. In the Mine Health and Safety Act, 1 million Rand fine. Refer the matter to the prosecuting authority for a decision as to whether the employer should be charged with an offense. And let's see if I can read that. Any person aggrieved by the imposition of a fine as contemplated by the section may apply for a review to the court. Point I'm just trying to make, folks, is if those of you who may have read or heard us in our first presentation, Neels and I did on the draft bill, that we were concerned that inspectors can impose a fine. We don't think they necessarily have the competence to impose a fine. And that's the way it's written into the bill. And now we see them backtracking. Now a normal regular inspector can't impose a fine, can recommend to a specialist higher up to impose a fine. So there's a backtracking already. Hence I say the bill that was published for comment will be different. There'll be another set of draft legislation coming for comment. Specialists may impose a fine. We've had that. I don't think I'll go through that again. You guys will see it on the recording. There are the schedules. Now, this, as I mentioned, is the Chief Inspector's presentation. And what he lists as contraventions are different again to what is in the bill. For example, Section 7, I'll be going through this again. Section 13, you know, it's called the duty to inform. You must inform your health and safety reps if there's an inspection. But hidden in Section 13 is a duty of making your employees conversant with the hazards and conversant with the precaution measures. A very strong, onerous duty imposed on you. So it's equivalent to Section 8. You fail to train somebody and they get injured or they die, you've contravened Section 8. Section 13, you fail to make somebody conversant with the hazard and they get injured and they die. Suddenly, that's not so serious. You can get a 50,000 Rand fine for that. So I'll go through these when we get to the schedules later on in my own show. Then they've got 37F, but a 37B in the draft bill. Criminal liability. An employer, a CEO, a manager, an agent, a user, or employee commits an offense by contravening or failing to comply with the provision of this act, thereby causing a person's injury. Note that one when we get to the bill. I can tell, let me give it away now. The bill says disablement, not injury. So there's already a change. Death, I'm going to cover that in the bull. Can you suddenly start talking about fatalities? What about the common law, culpable homicide, strafbare manslag? We have an offense for the negligent killing of people. You don't have to tell us now and there. Then they've got, oh, he's put in permanent disability, so he's added that, and then illness. In the Mine Health and Safety Act, serious illness. Now you come and you get flu, have you committed an offense? And then, of course, if you omit to do something, it's also an offense. Now, this is rather interesting. As I say, this is the latest PowerPoint presentation from DEL on inter alia the bill. And lo and behold, decision-making by inspectors and specialist inspector reasonably practicable. Now, those of you who've worked a lot with the Act will know that all your duties in the Act are tempered with reasonability and practicability. An employer shall, as far as is reasonably practicable, do this, do that. In fact, the wording is clipped from the ILO Convention on Occupational Health and Safety, where they give guidelines as far as is reasonably practicable. So there's the definition. I'll go through it again later on. But why are you talking about reasonably practicable? When you'll see what they've done with reasonably practicable in the draft bill, it's gone. So we can see already, maybe, hopefully a change, they might bring it back. They want to hold South African employers to a higher standard than internationally. They want to take out reasonably practicable. They want to introduce what seems to be strict liability. You have an accident, you get punished. Nobody cares whether you did what was reasonable. Nobody cares if you did what was practicable. You're somehow guilty. You can be charged. So we'll cover that as well in my own particular presentation, which I'm better at than there you can see. And Neels will switch me now to my own presentation. So what do we remember? Remember, folks, reasonably practicable. Remember imposing fines as opposed to recommending in fines. Remember that we're going to now address managers and supervisors, not just your 16-1 in a big company sitting in a glass palace in Sandton, and then the law provides for one statutory appointment, a 16-2. Who's normally so far removed from the realities of what's going on. What about those people that go right down to supervisors? They say they're going to cover it. You know, in construction, most of you are in construction, we have a structure. CEOs, 16-2s, construction managers, construction health and safety officers, construction supervisors. We've got designers in as well. And we thought that this whole issue will be addressed in the draft bill. And it's an amendment bill, so the bulk of the OHS Act is not going to be changed. It's just a couple of provisions. So I've pulled it back to the drawing board because it indeed must go back to the drawing board. And then what I've taken is, this is the new chief inspector comment he made during a webinar to Saiosh. And he said, I'd rather have people who challenge the law. Thank you for the tremendous role and impact Saiosh, and hopefully this individual is me, and individuals are making, and challenges they make to DL. So I'm not being controversial, I'm taking up his offer to challenge everything. So this is my agenda. We're going to look at section 16 and the proposals in that regard. I know from the Legal Advice Forum, there are a lot of questions recently as this week, I think, on section 16. I have my own point on that, my own opinion on you guys. And this is what I'm selling to a captive audience, which is you guys. You're my captive audience. We have proposed a section 16.3 statutory appointment because, as you will see, we feel that currently the limitations of the 16.1 is the CEO is not an appointment. There's a definition of a CEO. If the individual fits that definition, that's your 16.1. I know a lot say, I want an appointment of the CEO as a 16.1. You know, I think it's a corporate body, obviously, with the CEO. Normally a board would have to resolve that somebody's the 16-1. He can't appoint himself. It's not an appointment. There's a definition. You slot in with the definition, is a 16-1. So we're going to, I'm going to try and sell it to you, my captive audience. We're going to look at this reasonably practicable. If you look at sections 8, your duty to your employees as an employer, section 9, your duties to non-employees, section 10, which despite an odd title, general duties of manufacturers and others regarding articles and substances for use at work, despite that title, it places duties on designers. If you design a building and the building collapses and we focus on you and we feel you didn't do a proper design, we'll charge you with a section 10 contravention. Never mind the construction regulations. Section 10 is your ultimate construction provision in the Act because it's also got installation and erection in it. And I'm not Dr. Eve talking on a Friday sex talk on the Radio 702, hey? And so if you have an erection problem in construction, or you have a design problem of a structure, you must be judged against section 10. It's the ultimate provision. It is partly construction. It is your ultimate construction regulation. We get so focused on the construction regs that we forget we've got a section. A section is far more powerful than a regulation. An artikel van die wet, I don't even have to speak Afrikaans here, I know it's a vreemde taal, but a section carries more weight in law than a regulation. Sections form part of an act which is passed by Parliament. A regulation is promulgated by the minister without consulting Parliament. It carries less weight in law. It has theoretically less penalties than contravening a section of the act. Section 13, I've already said, people think it's the duty to inform your health and safety refs, but it's got the strong hidden duty of making your employees conversant with the hazards and conversant with the precaution measures. It's one of the common denominators in the many cases of that aren't made conversant. It's not just, hey, this is dangerous, watch out. That's not conversancy. You're going to tell them why it's dangerous, how to conduct themselves against a particular threat, and that along risk assessments, I always see coming up with cases I do, either they're not done or they're not done properly, or people aren't trained into them. And then section 13, I see quite a bit. Then we're going to look at one of my pet topics, the inspector's report. That's after you've had a section 31 investigation, which is what you see mostly. If you have an incident, you report it obviously to the Department of Labor. And they may or may not come out and hold an investigation in terms of section 31. I've had an issue with these section 31 investigations. The inspector has their own interpretation, and they never give you a copy of their report, which is my main crusade here today. And in the Mine Health and Safety Act, any fatal incident must be subjected to a formal inquiry. We have a presiding officer, the evidence is recorded, everyone testifies under oath or affirmation. We all see each other's statements, and a transcript, it's transcribed, and the families are invited of the deceased, and they can have legal representations. You must invite them to participate. But outside the Mine Health and Safety Act, in the OHS Act, fatalities can be casually investigated, if I can use that term, informally investigated. The families aren't invited. They have no role to play. They don't know anything that emanates from a Section 31 investigation. In the Mine Health and Safety Act, which is the gold standard for OHS legislation, because it came into being after the interim constitution was promulgated, it obviously had to align with the constitution. And then you guys be the judge whether we even looked at the Mine Health and Safety Act or followed it draft OHS amendment bill. Hey, the Constitution we're going to touch on. So bear with me. I've got some comic relief or some relief as well. I'll venture off topic as I always do. So I'm not just going to speak about the OHS amendment bill, but it's linked. Section 33 of the Bill of Rights, we're going to look at the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act, and then a lovely court case, Industrial Health Resource Group and others versus the Minister of Labour and others, Gauteng Province. And you'll see what they say about the Department of Labour, and as well as the certain provisions in the Occupational Health and Safety Act. And then I will comment on this, it'll make sense, this criminal liability, section 37B, why I think it's a problem, and the administrative fines. We did, as Saiosh, recommend they scrap the whole idea of imposing fines because they've got a schedule and the things that are there are so minute, it's hardly worth pursuing this thing. But I'm jumping the gun, and Neels warned me never to do that, and I'm doing it again.
Still on the agenda.
Yeah, I'm still on the agenda. Folks, just to touch on there have been some changes to section 16. CEO charged with certain duties. Now, this is the current act, and it says every CEO shall, as far as is reasonably practicable, ensure that the duties of his being changed employer as contemplated in the act are properly discharged. You all know about section 16. We've lived with this one since 1993. It applies obviously to a corporate body because there's the definition of a CEO in relation to a body corporate or enterprise conducted by the state, means the person who is responsible for the overall management and control of the business of such body, corporate, enterprise. Nice legalese there, but essentially it's not an appointment. You've got an individual, and if that individual meets the definition, that's your 16.1 CEO. And this one has become rather controversial, section 16.2. Without derogating from his very, what's the word? Not misogynistic, but you know, there's no her CEOs in this act. Without derogating from his responsibility or liability, a CEO may assign, not shall, not appoint in writing, not delegate, that word's not used, may assign any duty to any person contemplated in the said subsection to any person under the control and directions of the CEO. So if you don't have a 16.2 appointment, it's not an offense, just means the CEO's right up at the top and there's no team or no assigned people to assist. And you'll find inspectors will come and say, where's your 16.2? And you try and convince them, if you haven't got one, that it's not an offense. It takes a bit of time. Guys, I can give you quite a legal argument about this may assign. I was present when the draft OHS, this current draft was published of our current act. How many of you ever saw the draft OHS Act 1993, the one we're working with? I was working with it, and I knew the chief inspector, Mani Mulder. Hey? And this is how it was written. Every CEO shall, as far as ensure that the duties of his employer as contemplated in the act are properly discharged. Same as the current one. Then 16.2 said, without derogating from his responsibility or liability, a CEO may delegate, including the power of further delegation, any duty contemplated in the said act, in the said subsection, to any person under his control, which person shall act subject to the control and directions of the CEO. So originally it was drafted that the 16.1 CEO could assign somebody in terms of 16.2 and say to that person, you can assign further down in 16.2 and you can cascade it right down. So you covered those middle managers and those other managers right down. And then the department, and then they got stuck on the word delegate. They said, why use the word delegate? It's a rigid term in law. It's got rigid legal baggage, because to show off delegare non delegatus potest means a person to whom something has been delegated cannot delegate further. So now they got stuck. We've used this word delegate, but we're saying, okay, we can allow for further delegation. It's controversial, this goes this way and goes that way with legal theorists. Let's use the word assign. The sign doesn't mean anything in law. It doesn't have any legal baggage. But lo and behold, the Department of Labor decided that the 16.2 cannot assign further down, and they've used the word delegate, as you'll see in the draft bill. But they've been there's now for many years, you may have encountered it during the inspection, where they'll say, and I know it's happened in KZN, we got a contravention notice, I think, because at one of the refineries here, the 16.2 is the refinery manager, the 16.1 is in Cape Town, and the refinery manager then used 16.2 to appoint persons within the refinery. And we were served with the contravention notice, because that refinery manager is a 16.2, cannot use 16.2 to sign down. Only the people who directly report routinely to the CEO can be 16.2, and that creates a vacuum. I think you've all been quite creative in some of your other appointments, Section 8 appointments, Section 16.2 assistants, and Section 8 in brackets 2 in brackets I supervisors. I know in construction we know what to do because they've given us the structure right down in the construction regs. But outside construction, we've got the CEO, who's not an appointment. We've got the 16.2, which isn't an appointment. It's an assignment of duties, or now delegation of duties. And okay, you've got your general machinery regulation 2.1 competent person, which is a written appointment. But in the act itself, we've got nothing. And they've known for years that we have a problem. We're becoming creative. You're a Section 8 manager, you're an 8.2I supervisor. Why don't you tell us in law that we can make these statutory appointments? Because they're non-statutory. Everything under 16.2 is a non-statutory appointment, except in the construction regulations, of course. So this is the current bill. The CEO shall ensure, notice I've scratched that up, that the duties of his or her, we're recognizing you ladies, employers contemplating this act are properly discharged. Then it says the CEO shall develop, implement, and continuously review the health and safety management system as the employer may be directed in terms of Section 7.1. So it's not compulsory. Certain industries, we assume the chief inspector will say, you must do this. Now, here we have, without derogating from his or her responsibility or liability, a CEO may, still not must, in writing, delegate any duty contemplated in the said subsections to any person under his or her control, which person shall act subject to the control and directions of the CEO in the interest of occupation name. It says here in 2A, a person so delegated in terms of subsection 2 may not further delegate any duty to any other person. So their interpretation now they've put into law, and that wasn't the original intention many, many years ago. Department of Labor maintains only the direct reports can be delegated in terms of the current act, and now in the bill. Of course, you can't delegate further. So this is a bit pedestrian, but it's got to be covered, folks. So we sat, the Saiosh Technical Committee, we sat for a long time. We went thoroughly through the bill. I've only selected my pet items. I could keep you here for a week if we went through the entire draft bill, amendment bill, I should say. So we have suggested, and I want to hear what you guys think. Bearing in mind, we're not talking the construction regulations, but it could be applicable there. Saiosh Technical Committee proposes the inclusion of section 16.3. And we propose that except where specific written appointments are prescribed in terms of any regulation promulgated in terms of the Act, and without derogating from his or her liability or responsibility, or liability, I think I've got it twice, in terms of section 16.1 and section a CEO or a person appointed in terms of 16.2. So 16.1 or a 16.2 may in writing appoint one or more competent persons to assist in discharging their duties as envisaged in the Act in the interest of occupational health and safety. So what does that mean? I'll show you a slide later. You've got your CEO, because this is corporate bodies only. You've got your CEO. The direct reports are 16.2s, currently nothing. We say, make a 16.3 and you can appoint anybody. A safety officer is a 16.3. A middle manager. A supervisor as a section 16.3 read with section 8 in brackets 2I. So you can appoint anyone and it aligns with other countries. You guys, what do you think of 16.3? I think it'll cover a huge gap that exists. And if you see the first slide from the Department of Labor, they intimated they're going to do it, didn't they? They said in that first slide, and they didn't. In fact, the draft bill, as we saw it, was leaked to us in 2014 with no changes in 2000, and was it last year it came out, or this year? Without any changes. Nobody paid any attention to it. They just took it and they said, Minister, promulgate it. And even that they got wrong. There were some issues with the promulgation too. So folks, you with me with the 16.3, eh? It's still a bit of a pedestrian part, but I think it will cover the gap. And you lo and behold, it aligns more or less with the mine health and safety legislation. And there I say, the rationale behind this proposal is to address the vacuum currently experienced as regards the so-called statutory appointments, those two statutes, that's all we've got. Say where there are written appointments required, we know general machinery regulations require a general machinery competent person to be appointed in writing, and we know the construction regulations require the construction manager to be appointed in writing, the construction safety officers, construction supervisors. There's a structure there. Why, when you in the regulations create a lovely structure from the CEO essentially to the 16.2, who is the principal contractor, let's say, to the construction managers, why don't you emulate that outside construction, in industry in general? Why do you limit us there? The bill is silent on managerial and supervisory appointments that go down and are closer to the realities of the workplace. I hope they go for it. We've got a member here who has some influence there. I'm not going to look his way, but I'm hoping he's going to use his influence there. Managers and supervisors are an integral and essential part of the employer's health and safety management system, and they deserve statutory recognition. Even your safety officers outside construction, you can appoint them in terms of section 16.3. The Mine Health and Safety Act has provision for safety officers to be appointed. You've got 300 employees at a mine, you have to appoint 2 safety officers, 301 with 1 principal safety officer. Where's the appointment of safety officers outside construction? Your industry. You don't get any statutory recognition, only in construction. And they've known about this for years, and we've actually told them informally, you know, give a recognition, statutory recognition to the safety practitioners, safety and health practitioners industry. And I honestly thought it would happen, didn't. The CEO and the 16.2 are too far removed from the realities of the workplace to properly discharge their statutory duties without managerial and supervisory assistance, resulting in employers having to resort to the so-called in-house appointments, often labeled 16.2 assistants, Section 8.2 appointments, Section 8.2I supervisors. So I assume a number of you also outside construction here, and I assume you use these type of things as well to cover that gap. What an opportunity lost to cover that particular gap and to give statutory recognition to your industry and to middle managers, senior managers who don't report directly to the CEO, who can't be a 16.2. And we get that on the legal advice forum. We often get queries about this type of thing. While it can be argued that these in-house appointments carry the same weight in law as statutory appointments, since they constitute a lawful order as envisaged in Section 14C of the Act, managers and supervisors should be given statutory recognition. Oh, I've said that. But what I'm saying here is, the duties of employees is found in Section 14 of the Act. To take reasonable care for the health and safety of themselves, cooperate with the employer in the interests of health and safety, and then the interesting one, carry out any lawful order given by the employer. So if you say, listen, guy, you can't be a 16.2 because you're not the direct report of the CEO, I'm going to make you an 8.2, 16.2 assistant, that is a lawful order given to that individual. And if that individual doesn't comply with that lawful order, that individual's committed a criminal offense. So it's the same as a statutory appointment. You don't fulfill your statutory duty, you fail. You potentially committed a crime. You don't carry out an in-house appointment, you've potentially committed a crime. And this is where I made a faux pas. A statutory appointment does not necessarily increase potential criminal liability. It just creates a structure. That's what you want. You want a structure ultimately headed by the CEO. You don't have a structure, then people say, who do I turn to? I need resources here to make this area safe. I'll go speak to the safety officer who's not in a structure because they don't give any, they got no statutory recognition. The lines are blurred as to who you report to. And the CEO doesn't even know about it, or the 16.2, who's sitting often and is not on site or not there. So we're trying to cover that particular area with our 16.3, which I'm selling to my captive audience here today. As I said, that aligns with my slide and show you. A Section 8 doesn't provide for appointments. It merely contains the duties of employers to the employees. So where does it say in Section 8 today, you may appoint this one and you may appoint that one? It says, provide a safe and healthy working environment in Section 8.1, then 8.2 tells you how to go about it. Inter alia, you do this, you train people and so on. Then Section 13, you make people conversant with the hazard. Now, the interesting thing is we said, you saw DL says we're going to follow international practices, and they intimate we're going to look at other laws. The UK legislation also recognizes the importance of such a devolved statutory appointment system. And they say every employer shall appoint one or more competent persons to assist him in undertaking the measures he needs to take to comply with the requirements and prohibitions imposed upon him by or under the relevant statutory provisions. So in the UK, you can appoint anyone as long as they're competent in the not the legal competency. It's always the controversial thing, competency, because I call it legal competency, where it says, for example, in the general machinery regulations, the competent person must have this, this, and this, and this. That's legal competency. This is your normal, you must know what you're doing, competency. Eh? And then the UK, they say the employer shall ensure that the number of persons appointed under paragraph 1 the time available for them to fulfill their functions and the means at their disposal are adequate, having regard to the size of his undertaking, the risks to which he is employed. It's nice to spell it out, but it's common sense, isn't it, really? And as I said, the DL said we must look at other countries' legislation. Now, this doesn't come out well, but especially with my new glasses on. What I'm trying to show you here is that the Mine Health and Safety Act has a fixed statutory structure. You have, it does differ slightly in that your CEO doesn't necessarily in the Mine Health and Safety Act have to be your, the CEO in the traditional sense doesn't have to be the CEO for a mine. You can appoint another board member to actually take over your duties. So I won't go into that, but you can see the board as mine managers, shift bosses, mine overseers, there's a structure. Why didn't we follow it? And then you guys know the construction regulations pretty well. Eh? You've got a CEO there, you've got your principal contractor, your contractor will be normally a 16.2, not a 16.1. Sometimes the CEOs of smaller entities do get involved. There's the construction regulation 8.1 manager, 8.2, 8.7, 8.8, 8.5. A structure. If this was the normal act and not the construction regulations, you'd only have that. That's where it ends. Why not follow the example of the in the amendment bill? You had an ideal opportunity. So I've labored that point quite a bit. And this is what our proposal could look like at the end of the day. You've got your 16.1, you've got your direct reports, even though I don't agree with the interpretation of the Department of Employment and Labor. And that's where it ends currently. And we say, okay, you can appoint anyone. In terms of 16.3, obviously, they must be competent in the general sense of the word. You can have a manager, Section 8 manager. You can have another lower level manager as a 16.3. You can have another lower level manager as a 16.3. You can have a supervisor as a 16.3. You can have safety officer as a 16.3. It aligns with the UK legislation. It in fact aligns with the International Labour Organization's convention as well. You think it'll cover the gap that have you guys experienced problems with 16 outside construction with this gap from the 16.2 down to your supervisory level? Who uses a Section 8 appointment? And you know now there's no provision for an appointment in Section 8. We've got to be creative. 16.2 assistants, anybody use that terminology? There's a gentleman, yeah. You know, and the Department of Employment and Labor, or let's say the legislator, knew about these problems we've had. And here comes a draft bill that we could cure all those problems, and they failed to do so. And why do I call back to the drawing board? Because indeed, that's where I think we have to go. And I've heard that we may be going back to the drawing board as well. General duties of employers to the employees, Section 8. I'm not going to go through the whole Section 8. It's very important that you realize that well, I haven't got a line drawn through it. It's still there. A working environment that's safe and without risk to the health. And then I'll just keep this one in. You conduct a workplace-specific risk assessment and thereafter develop and implement a risk management plan in writing in respect of every risk identified. I think if you're in construction, you've preempted this. I think most companies have preempted it, and safety practitioners, you have preempted that. But I've kept it in with that involved that for some odd reason, we in Section 8.1, we've kept reasonably practicable. It's very important for us in law. those words, those two words. Reasonably one, but deliberately removed in section A2. All those little subsections, section A2, what you do every time they scratch out reasonably practicable. So you could argue, well, it's in 8.1, so if they take it out in 8.2, maybe it still applies, but I don't think that argument will hold water. It's removed in sections 9. I'm going to show you 10, 13, and 16. So I'm not going to go into the changes to section 8. Basically, it is this risk layer, this specific risk assessment and plan that you must compile. Section 9 is the duties of employers and self-employed persons to persons other than their employees. It's if this center has a duty of ensuring we are here because we are non-employees of this particular venue. It's a crime that municipalities are quite prone to, metros, you know, where the public has access and they fall into manholes and this. And and undertaking in such a manner that persons other than those in his employment who may be directly affected by his activities are not exposed. Oh no, that was taken out. Sorry guys, I'm using what's taken out. Every employer shall conduct an undertaking in such a manner to ensure that the risk posed by identified hazards to persons other than those in the direct employ of the organization who may be directly affected by the organization's activities are not thereby exposed to hazards to their health or safety, and the risk is managed in line with the risk management plan contemplated in 8.2a, which we saw before. That's the point I really wanted to make. Sorry, folks, I thought I bolded that, but that in brackets is always deleted in the draft form. Now you must say to yourself, you're a lawyer and you see now this, as far as is reasonably practicable, is deleted deliberately in every other provision, except they forgot to delete it in 8.1 in the previous slide. It's defined in section 1 of the OHS Act, and they've retained the definition. So why do you retain the definition of reasonably practicable and then you delete it in every single provision? Surely you then delete the definition as well. Why did the current chief inspector put a slide on reasonably practicable? And then you say to yourself, does it impact on us? Because, you know, if they say to me, Raynard, you must do this as far as is reasonably practicable, and here's the definition, we'll look at the state of knowledge about a particular hazard, we would look at the cost versus benefit. You're removing a potential defense that I have in law, because I can argue, okay, we had an incident, somebody was injured, became ill or died, but we did everything within the bounds of reasonability and practicability to prevent this incident. And here's the definition. I had a case many years ago where one person died, one became unconscious. They were working a rendering plant, which is like a big chicken abattoir. And their job was to dispose of rain. And they came into the offal section in the rendering plant certain times, and they would hose the chicken blood down the drain. And one day they just collapsed inside this little drain. It wasn't a confined space as such, as defined. And they collapsed and one guy died. And for the life of us, we didn't know what caused this person to die, what caused this person to slip into a coma for quite a long time. And we then contacted our sister companies in South Africa. We went international, and it turned out that congealed chicken blood can give off hydrogen sulfide, and we didn't know that. So we argued that we did the state of knowledge of this particular hazard didn't exist anywhere, because we went to every single company, local and international, who had never encountered this. And they still don't know what triggers it, what point congealed chicken blood will trigger a giving off emitting hydrogen sulfide. And the case didn't go anywhere because we had the defense of reasonably practicable to argue. And now they want to take that away. But it's academic, I say, because the concept to show off in Latin, lex non coget ad impossibilia. The law can't force you to do the impossible. So if it was impossible to know that congealed chicken blood could give off hydrogen sulfide, which could be fatal, we can't impose the law upon you. Now, the Constitutional Court has already embraced this as well. So you can take away reasonably practicable. And we've argued that it looks like the legislator wants to move to strict liability. I mentioned that before. You must do this come hell or high water. We're going to give you no leeway, no reasonably, no practicability, but you can do it because the Constitutional Court in Conseil versus RAF, you can see CC, Constitutional Court, said we embrace this common law principle of lex non coget ad impossibility. We cannot force employers to do what's impossible. They seem to be trying to introduce it in the draft bill. Now, Section 10, despite their title, General Duties of Manufacturers and Others regarding articles and substances for use at work, in construction provision in the Act, as I said before, if you design a structure, it must be safe and without health risks. If you install or erect a structure on a premises, Section 10 says it must be safe and without health risks, and you'll be judged against that, even in a construction-related incident. They've removed as far as is reasonably practicable there as well. That's really the point I want to make. If you design, manufacture, import, sell, lease, supply any article, it must be safe. Oddly enough, there's a similar provision in the Mine Health and Safety Act, Section 22, word for word, almost verbatim, and they keep reasonably practicable. They say if you design something for a mine, as far as is reasonably practicable, it must be safe, but they delete it in this draft bill. They are starting in the draft Mine Health and Safety Amendment Bill, they're also removing reasonably practicable. I ask you, what's the purpose of that? The courts aren't going to take it seriously because lex non coget ad impossibilia. We can't punish you for something that was impossible. And we're hoping that it'll come back as well. Now, I'm not sure if any of you have ever seen a Section 10.4 written undertaking. It's a lovely legal instrument that's not as well known as the Section 37.2 written agreement, which I'm sure you all know. If you, for example, want to supply somebody with a article is the word, let's say a machine, and you know the guards aren't in place, but you want to give it to them, supply it to them, and you say, listen, I'm going to supply you with this machine. It's not guarded as per the general machinery regulations, therefore it's not safe. But this is what you must do before you use it. You must do the following and make it safe. You can have that person sign a document, a written undertaking, and that person undertakes to make it safe, bring it into compliance. They've deleted that. So what is the intention there? You can never, never supply anyone with an article that is non-compliant with any legislation. There's a prohibition, in other words, on supplying articles to people unless that article complies with the provisions of this act or all prescribed requirements. So foot stewards exists well, it's non-criminal law, let's say, but it's retained in the Mine Health and Safety Act, which is the gold poster of OHS, and it exists in the UK legislation. A person may rely on a written undertaking to ensure the safety of an item. It gets worse. It gets worse. So what are you guys going to do? You've got equipment that's redundant or you don't need it anymore. You've got to now make it completely compliant, make sure it's safe, spend all that money on it before you can supply it to somebody else. You can't have them undertake in writing anymore to make it compliant. I don't understand what the agenda is, and believe it or not, I looked at the International Labour Organization's convention. They have a similar thing. So we're departing from a treaty that we ratified as well. Now, this is where I said it gets worse. Section 22, sale of certain articles prohibited. It says there, subject 4, if any requirement in respect of any article, plant, machinery, safety, equipment, or for the use or application thereof has been prescribed, no person shall sell or market in any manner whatsoever such article, substance, plant, machinery, health and safety equipment, unless it complies with that requirement. But they say, save for the provisions of 10.4, but they've deleted 10.4. So they're not, they haven't applied them. Yeah. Sorry? Oh. Yeah. Donation, that's all it's going to be. Or scrap, sell it to scrap. How do you circumvent this thing? You can never supply anyone with an article unless it's compliant with any prescribed requirement, i.e. safe and healthy as well. And as I say, it's retained in the miner. So the miners can do it, but we can't do it. You can do it in the UK, but you can't do it here. Section 41 of the bill, this act not affected by technical and legal. Currently, the act says, save for the provisions of section 10.4 of this act, they should affected by any term or condition of any agreement, whether such agreement was entered to before or after the commencement of this act, or before or after the imposition of any such condition as the case may be. Now, in layman's terms, all they say is you can't, by mutual agreement, bypass the law. You can't say the law says you must do this, and let's agree amongst ourselves, contractors. We're not going to comply with construction regulation, this and construction regulation. We now agree on our own in a contract or just a verbal agreement. We're not going to comply. So they say you can't do that, which makes sense. Eh? You can't just decide between yourselves to neglect the law. But the current act says save for, with the exception of 10.4 and 37.2. And why do they say it? Let's focus on section 37.2, which incidentally is retained. And you all know section 37.2. We get a lot of queries on that on the forum as well. That is basically, and I can give you a lecture on 37.2, the most misunderstood document in the world. Let's, for example, so you can never have an agreement now to bypass the law, let's say, or to amend or alter the law. Let's say, I think that's the example, I'll give you General Safety Regulation 2A. So as an employer, you have a duty of ensuring nobody enters your workplace who's under the influence of alcohol, intoxicated, etc. That is your duty as the employer. You can't give it to somebody else. You must, that's your statutory duty. Currently, it says because of 37.2, you can then conclude an agreement with a contractor, or a mandatory is the word, and say you will do the policing of intoxication and the breathalyzers and everything. You're another company, a security company or whatnot, we're giving you that duty in terms of 37.2. It's our duty in law to ensure our people are not under the influence of alcohol, but we give it to you to do the testing. You're the security people. Now it's prohibited because it says, no, you can't use 37.2 is now gone. You can't use this arrangement to subcontract or outsource to somebody to perform some of your functions. And we've already covered 10.4. And I think that's an issue. I mean, it's common practice, isn't it? When you have like somebody at the gates who's now outsourced company, they do all this type of stuff for you before they enter your workplace. In terms of the bill, it's prohibited. It's your duty. You can't contract or outsource it out anymore. Okay, there's reasonably practicable. The definition, you saw it in the Chief Inspector's presentation, and we say, why did he have it in there when you saw it? See, now it's been deleted every time. They're depriving us of this particular potential legal defense of arguing, but your worship, we did everything that was reasonable. Well, there's a definition. Let's go through the definition, your worship, and you'll see. And the definition is reasonably practicable, means practicable having regard to the severity and scope of the hazard or risk concerned, the state of knowledge reasonably available concerning that hazard or risk, and of any means of removing or mitigating that hazard or risk, the availability and suitability of means to remove or mitigate that hazard or risk, and the cost of removing or mitigating that hazard or risk in relation to the benefits deriving therefrom. It's a defense to argue, look, I've had an incident that has a result, injury, illness, or death, but let's test me against this definition and I'll show you. We never anticipated this particular risk. No reasonable person would have. There's nothing available to protect us from that, or the cost was prohibitive. We can argue that. Reasonably practical. You retain, why do you retain in the bill the definition? So, you know, it's an amendment bill, so all the provisions of the current act remain. So they've got a definition of reasonably practicable, which I've read to you. And then they remove it in the bill. But you've got the definition still in section 1. It makes no sense. If you're going to remove it, remove the definition. Why tell us? And as I say, every country that with the Saiosh Technical Committee research contained the words reasonably practicable. All the duties in every single country, USA, UK, Australia, is reasonably practicable. And there I'll touch on lex non coget ad impossibilia. I'm a bit of a, you know, makes you sound clever if you quote Latin, you know. By omitting the words reasonably practicable, which is universally accepted as a yardstick to judge whether an employer has properly discharged his or her duties, see our PCIM, the bill appears to venture into the area of strict liability, which has been consistently rejected by the criminal courts, including the Constitutional Court. Strict liability means you get convicted even though we don't look at fault, whether you were negligent or intentional or whatever. Strict liability infers that employee may be convicted of contraventions in the absence of the fault element. Culpa, to show off again, means negligence. Culpability comes from a Latin, you see. In 1997, the Constitutional Court ruled that in South Africa, the principle of strict liability infringes negatively on the right to a fair trial provided for in section 35(3) of the Constitution, as well as the right to freedom and security of the person provided for in section 12(1) of the Constitution. So it can't be strict liability because it's unconstitutional. There's the ILO Convention C155 Occupational Safety and Health Convention 81, Article 4, we're a signatory to it. The aim of this policy shall be to prevent accidents to injury to health and injury to health arising out of, linked with, or occurring in the course of work by minimizing, as far as is reasonably practicable, the causes of hazards inherent in the work environment. So that's it's an agency to the United Nations, and they use those lovely words. I suppose we're not bound by it in the sense we did ratify it, so we're bound by it, but I suppose we can go further than it as long as we don't introduce measures that are weaker. So we seem to be the only country in the world that is now deviating from the ILO convention, which recommends that you have duties tempered with reasonability and practice. Now, I think it's taken. And hopefully the next slide, we still, strict liability has no place in occupational health and safety. Legislation where negligence or coupa is the element. Hey, I'm just showing off there. And of course, removing that, we think you're going into strict liability. Let's say that you can't argue now, according to the bill, that the severity and scope of the hazard or risk concerned was a consideration in determining whether employers discharged their statutory duties. You can't argue that there was nothing available. The availability and suitability of means to remove or mitigate that hazard or risk, and the cost of removing or mitigating that hazard or risk in relation to benefits deriving therefrom. And you know that I gave you the chicken blood example where we actually argued successfully that nobody in the world knew about this particular hazard and nobody in the world addressed it. So we're not negligent, as simple as that. And I say the new chief inspector does refer to the definition of reasonably practicable. The definition is retained. This is always to remind me, I one step ahead of my slides. The definition is also in the Mine Health and Safety Act. I think it's sloppy law writing, or why do we want to do this? Nulla puna sine culpa means no punishment without fault in by the court. I'm not going to read everything here, but this is a case I picked up, Pick It Up Limited versus the South African Municipal Workers Union on behalf of members and others. See Labour Appeal Court. The Labour Appeal Court is equal to the second most senior court. And what happened is Pick It Up decided that unilaterally they're going to introduce breathalyzers for all their drivers, which is a good thing, isn't it? And but they didn't go through a consultation process. So it's a labor relations issue. And the union said, we want you to come and talk to us first before you introduce unilaterally these breathalyzers. And the case really just strengthens my argument about reasonably practicable. I seem to not get off reasonably practicable. And the learned judge said, sections 8 and 9 therefore place a duty on the employer to act proactively to avoid any harm or injury to its employees and others. There is no standard as to what is reasonably practicable. So now the courts are already using that term. Each case will be determined on its own facts and circumstances. As you can see from the definition of reasonably practicable, it involves weighing different considerations from risk evaluation, means of removing or avoiding the risk, resource availability, and cost-benefit analysis. So what we have the equivalent of the Supreme Court of Appeal pretty recently embracing the definition of reasonably practicable. What do we have? A draft bill, but retains the definition as well in section 1. You want to do away with it? Do away with the definition. And then I won't read what Lord so-and-so said. Lord Peter Hain, you know him, eh? I was at school with him. He was talking about Pretoria boys dying. Elon Musk, Lord Peter Haig, Oscar Pistorius. I must mention that one. So guys, the recording is there, the slides will be there, and read that because I'm throwing so much wording at you, I actually feel bad. The amendment bill, Section 31 investigations. Who of you have been through a Section 31 investigation? Obviously into an injury, the Department of Labor came out. Have you been happy with the manner in which it's conducted? Did the inspector tell you what? I've never been happy. Each one has their own interpretation or own manner of Section 31. I know you're a previous inspector. I've never liked 31. Maybe for small stuff, you can do a 31. And I'll tell you why now. So the current act says an inspector may investigate the circumstances of any incident which has occurred at or originated from a workplace or in connection with the use of plant or machinery which has resulted, or in the opinion of the inspector could have resulted in the injury, illness, or shall. So every incident must be investigated. You know, it currently says may. Near misses, you're going to have time for all of those things. Point I really want to make is, which in the opinion of the inspector could have resulted in injury. But if you look further on, we haven't got there. Only disablement is a crime, not injury. You saw the previous inspectors, or the current inspector's previous slide where he's put injury in, but you'll see later that injury is not a crime anymore. You can go injure each other, as long as you don't disable them. Then you've committed a crime. So just make sure you know what you're doing when you injure people. Eh? Only disablement is criminalized. That's a second. So what am I trying to demonstrate to you is this act, this bill hasn't been thought out properly. It really hasn't been thought. Section 32, the formal inquiries, very few of them held. My last one here in Durban was the flammable store collapse, Freightmax Imperial Group. Then there was the pole print fire, and there was Tongaat collapse, Grayson Bridge collapse. There were very few of them held. There are not enough inspectors who, and you've really got, in a formal inquiry, you've got to know your law of privilege as well. You're like a commissioner of an inquiry. So you've got to be like Zondo. You must know when to shut people up. It's the law of privilege applies. So you've got to have legal knowledge as well as the technical knowledge, because you're holding an occupational health and safety formal inquiry. And I was very impressed with Sandile Kubeka, who's here in KZN. He held the last formal inquiry where I participated. The chief inspector may, and he shall, when so requested by a person, anybody, producing prima facie evidence of an offence at face value as enough evidence, appoint a presiding inspector to conduct a formal inquiry into any incident which has occurred at or originated from a workshop, listen to me, from a workplace, or in connection with the use of plant and machinery which has resulted, or in the opinion of the inspector could have resulted in illness, injury, or death. The wording is the same, they haven't changed it. The question I ask is, when is there prima facie evidence of an offence? So you have a building collapse. If there wasn't a flood, a tsunami, or a meteor or anything, surely there's prima facie evidence of an offence when a building collapses. A design element. So I've always had a problem with that. Somebody's injured or killed because a building's collapsed, and there must be prima facie at face value evidence of an offence. So that's written as is in the current act, and I still don't like it. I'm going to tell you why. In the Mine Health and Safety Act, every fatality must be subjected to a formal inquiry. And I think it's only right. And the reason is that it's in line with the Constitution because of transparency. One, it's open to the public. Two, the families of the deceased are invited to participate in cross-question. And I really thought the draft bill would introduce formal inquiries for fatalities. The other things you can use is Section 31 investigation, the informal, more casual route, is you need to, it's a serious potential crime is a fatality because you can be convicted of culpable homicide, which is a common law crime. And if you're convicted of a common law crime, such as culpable homicide, you get a criminal record. It's sent to the criminal bureau, your fingerprints are taken, it impacts upon your life. You're a criminal. You've been convicted of negligently killing somebody. And surely when you have with a serious crime hanging over your head that you potentially can be convicted of, you want to test the evidence. You want to hear what people say. You want a lawyer to cross-question them. This one will have a lawyer. And it is in line with the Constitution. And you've heard of the Audi Arterum Partum rule, the Audi rule. It's called on TV a lot in the Zondo Commission. You must hear the other side so that you can then combat whatever they say. And sadly, the draft bill doesn't address this issue. So you can still have a serious fatal accident, as I have now recently with the company. And it's quite hysterical because the company is involved in the chicken industry. And I saw their internal investigation report, which just working on, and they say they don't suspect foul play, but with a W. So, formal inquiry, where am I now? Oh, I was starting on a new slide here. It just shows you I get so democratic. The inspector shall submit a copy of the report after a Section 31 investigation, statements and documents to the provincial control inspector within the area of jurisdiction of the incident, who will, after consultation with the chief inspector, submit the report to the NPA. No provision for anyone else to get a copy of the report. The employer doesn't get it. How do you know what's written in it? How do you know? Oh, is it? That must be quick on time. Oh, I thought I had a lot of time. I'll do some summaries. Yeah, now I can see they need to wake up here. Basically, yeah, let me do some summaries then. So even after a formal inquiry today, the few that are held, we never get the inspector's report. We never know what's said that's negative about us. The only time we'll know is if we get a summons from the National Prosecuting Authority, and then it's too late to address certain issues. So in the Mine Health and Safety Act, a copy of the report must be given to the employer and the union. Let's do some, you can look at that, guys, in your record. Also not going to read this case, Industrial Health Resource Group case, but the failure of the Department of Employment and Labor to give interested parties on request a copy of the inspector's report is unlawful and invalid. Now, you've got a high court saying this, and yet the draft bill doesn't take into account. You can only get a copy of the inspector's report using the Promotion of Access to Information Act. And he said that's unlawful. And then let me show you a couple of pictures. Because this case, incidentally, let me go back. Slightly different to my little thing. This pertains to the Palfred fire. The dependents of the 11 people who burned to death, or the family members, said, I want to know what happened. You know that Tibor was the presiding officer there. It was a Section 32 formal inquiry. And the Department of Employment and Labour said, we're not giving you a report. Use the Promotion of Access to Information Act. So I went to court and the court ruled as following. Now, this is a picture I thought it's not comic relief, it's serious. This is CCTV of the pulp and fire as it happened. I found it on YouTube. I'll press that one, press that one. Ah, press the wrong one. Let me just grab some water. So there they're working nicely, nicely, nicely. Remember the 11 people burned to death in this. And you can see what's happening there, hey? So obviously you're not going to see much now because that's smoke, and then it'll go turn a color of orange. Ah, I see what you mean. It's really quite boring, but there you can see now that. Look at that, you can see a bit. People running. I think it's almost at an end. The Grayson Bridge collapse. On my website, I think the link is there, not to the Grayson, to the pulp and fire. I have a copy of the inspector's report if you're interested. Pages 100 to 106 are the recommendations. I think there was a recommendation of 11 entities get charged, even with culpable homicide. Grayson Bridge. Going to read, we got a leaked copy of the inspector's findings. Why? Because they won't give us a report. So also there, you can find it on my website there. You'll find immediate extracts of the report. I've got a slide on it, but we won't go through it. Point I'm making, refuse to give us the report. So that's linked to the media and we get it. And that is not transparent as far as I'm concerned, which is one of the undertakings of the DEL. Some of you may remember this case. I was involved. It's a flammable store that collapsed. We tried to get the inspector's report. We still haven't got it. We need that information because we're suing each other. We're instituting civil cases. So I've also got a little picture of that. Let's see if I get it going.
Rescue paramedics are currently on Chamberlain Road near Manchester Road in the Wentworth area, where parts of this building has collapsed on a truck and injuring multiple patients. At this stage, there's still 2 people entrapped underneath this wreckage, and 5 others have sustained moderate injuries and are being treated by advanced life support paramedics as we speak, and will be transported through to various Durban hospitals for the further care that they're required.
As I say, I represented one of the contractors, but it was actually the insurer of the contractor I represented. 2018, they refused to give us the inspector's report. Quickly go through the Bill of Rights. The Constitution, everyone has the right to administrative action that is lawful. Everyone has the right, whose rights have been adversely affected by administrative actions, has the right to be given written reasons. You know that an investigation by the inspector is an administrative action, eh? And the Constitution says we have the right to be given written reasons for whatever your decision has been made. Now, the Constitution says things in broad terms, but then the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act comes in. Everyone whose rights have been adversely affected by an administrative action, that could be a prohibition notice, that could be a contravention notice, that could be a decision after an investigation or formal inquiry, has the right to be given written reasons. Now, you saw the previous slides by the Department of Labor, transparency. We want to align it with the Constitution, but that is contrary to the Constitution to refuse to tell you what happened in that particular case that I just showed you. If you exercise a public power in terms of any legislation, inquiry, a prohibition notice, an investigation, you have the right to be given reasons for why we just recommended prosecution against it. And that you can read as well. This is basically, I wanted to cover this one. I'll try and summarize it. Criminal liability, 37B, they say you commit an offense as an employer, a CEO, a manager, or an agent, or an employee if you cause somebody's death. Now, why do you write that? Some of you guys have been inspectors. Currently, an inspector cannot say, I recommend a charge of culpable homicide for a fatal accident. That only the National Prosecuting Authority can make that decision. Now they want to say, hey, if you killed somebody, you've contravened Section 37B. You're creating a new crime, a statutory homicide offense. And nowhere in our jurisprudence do we have a statutory homicide offense. Not in the Mine Health and Safety Act, not in the Road Traffic Act, anywhere. And then they say you commit a crime if you permanently disable people. But in previous regulation or previous provisions, you talk about injury. Now you talk about disablement, illness. So I've explored that point as well. We say Section 16.3 will cure this. Look at that as well, because now I believe I'm running out of time. Administrative fines, I've mentioned that as well. That currently it says if a person commits a breach of this act, the inspector may, by written notice to that person, impose a fine. Now you know that the current chief inspector said he can only recommend a fine to a specialist. So it's already changing. So we assume that things will change. These are your fines that you can get. Up to 50,000 Rand. If you don't have a policy requirement, Health and Safety Committee is not sitting and not doing what they should, you can get a 50,000 Rand fine. Medical practitioners, if they don't report an occupational disease, can get a 50,000 fine. Now they've got their functions of the inspectors. You can get a 25,000 Rand fine. So it must be pertaining to an inspector. If they don't carry out their functions, they can get a 25,000 Rand fine. And these are the schedules of penalties. Also going to not run. There's a 2B, which doesn't exist. If you fail in your Section 8, you can get 5 million or 5 years in jail. Section 13, 200,000, which makes no sense. You can look at them, the schedule as well. This one I have a particular gripe with. If you contravene a regulation, you can get a fine of 5 million Rand or imprisonment not exceeding 12 months. So the fines for a regulation promulgated by the minister are exactly the same as a fine for the sections of the act that are in an act of parliament debated in parliament. That is irrational, completely. So I'm saying to you, does the bill align with the Constitution, guys? What do you think? I've only touched on a few things. Or the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act, does it align with international developments? Does the post-constitutional MHS Act, Mine Health and Safety Act, is there an agenda behind the deliberate omission of reasonably practicable? Is it rational for a regulation penalty to be the same as a section contravention? Are they fulfilling their promises they made to us? There are many other flaws in the bill. Back to the drawing board. Let's look at promises made.
load shedding.
There will never be load shedding again.
So I don't think there will never be load shedding again. And I don't think that EEL, when they presented what they envisaged in the draft bill, was fulfilled at all. Guys, sorry, I raced through the last part. Just a, yeah. No.
I know every time, you just say there, towards the live with our 600 members online. There's an opportunity now to ask Raynard here in this venue today a question or two. If there is any questions, we'll take 3 maximum due to time. Please, if it's related to the OHS goal or any clause that you picked up or anything that you'd like to ask about the OHS goal directly to Raynard. We'll repeat it. I'll ask Raynard to repeat the questions. Any questions for Raynard? I know it's very comprehensive. I know you only touched on. Yes, Jenny, you'll have to
Raynard, you mentioned section 16.3. We know that there is legislation for that. Is it changing to incorporate that or is there in fact in addition to the employees responding to that the CEO is
I can answer that quickly while I'm talking back. That is the proposal on the Saiosh Technical Committee to put it in that law.
Yeah, there's no section 16.3 as such now, but we have proposed that they, in our comments on the draft bill, that they incorporate a section 16.3 appointment so that we can cover our middle managers, supervisors, safety practitioners, along the lines of the Mine Health and Safety Act, UK legislation, etc. So it's a proposal which we hope will be accepted.
Jenny, have a look. I'm not sure what copy that. Which copy is that? Who's got the Saiosh copy? Okay, we'll take that offline. If you don't mind. Is there any other questions for Raynard to provide us?
Well, you say there's an agenda which we are very reasonable, practicable. I think you study law, I think that's fundamental. So, what's your opinion on the agenda?
Yes, I mentioned there's an agenda, or is there agenda? I questioned whether there was an agenda with the deliberate deletion of the term reasonably practicable, which we find in this draft bill, as well as the Mine Health and Safety Amendment draft bill. It's political, not legal. So you're going to catch me out there. I think they want to hold us to a higher standard than before. I think it's, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it. I think that there's pressure within the Department of Labor, or the powers that be, from the tripartite alliance, the unions, the hostility towards the private sector. I can only think of it. So it's political.
There's one more question in the back.
Raynard, it's actually a two-part question. First one is, seeing that you are signatories of the ADA, the effects of our legislation, because we are signatories to what ADA is saying, our amendments to this, how will this impact our signatory with ADA?
Okay, so the question really pertains to us being a signatory to the International Labour Organization's OHS Convention. I haven't really researched, you know, when you sign a treaty, you're bound by it. You know, that's what the normal legal common sense thing is. What we have done now is we deviated from, and I'm not sure what the impact is of, they talk about promoting OHS within the bounds of reasonability and practicability in the convention. I'm not sure if we are bound to include reasonably practicable, or if we are allowed to have more stringent legislation and go further. I'm not quite sure of that particular element, but it is surprising. If you look at other countries' legislation, the wording is almost identical to the conventions, and to our own legislation. So I think somebody wasn't aware of the ILO convention who wrote the draft. Well, I'll be honest with you. No.
Because when we completed our comments on the bill, we tried to spread it as far as wide as possible, not just giving the comments to the Department of Employment and Labour, but we sourced every possible recognized union in South Africa, and we actually responded and said, thank you very much. But I don't believe that the unions has really worked through this bill like we did, and maybe we saw the meetings on my health. That was very,
yeah.
I don't think they have it struck yet.
Yeah.
I don't think so. That's my opinion.
Yeah, well, we managed to sneak into the Mine Health and Safety Council, which comprises, we got the link for one of their meetings, which comprises the unions. Nothing really was stated there about occupational health and safety, ironically, in the Mine Health and Safety Council. It was more about remuneration of people that are being boarded and whatnot. But I think the agenda, I think it's driven by unions, this more stringent approach to what is, you know, there's a hostility between the unions and business. It's an anti-business piece of legislation. That's really, in conclusion, what I can say. It's not business friendly, put it that way. And the same thing is happening in the Mine Health and Safety Draft Amendment Bill. Also, and we also sneaked into meetings by top legal houses, and we heard their Zoom meetings, and they have the same issues that we have as Saiosh. Is what is the reasoning behind this established international norm of tempering or softening duties with reasonably practicable? We don't know, but it must be politically driven. There is an agenda, put it that way. It's too deliberate. Every deletion is too deliberate to be accidental.
That's like Margaret just mentioned, because in the difference with the mine health, the law, mine health and safety law, is that there's lots of interest by mining that actually put money on challenge this.
Yeah.
We found with the OHS law, unions don't even look at it.
Yeah.
Big employers that haven't even got a clue how this problem that like is because of the basket. So there's a subtle difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking now of my Uber car and I forgot what I was going to do. Yeah, you're making me stressed now over my job. The Minerals Council, the old Chamber of Mines, has challenged many things in terms of the mining charter. The mining companies have routinely taken the Department of Mineral and Energy to court over their fines, over this, over that. And they are going to challenge the draft MHS amendment bill. They have stated they're going to, some of the legal houses, they're going to challenge it. And for some unknown reason, the employer organizations and those with deeper pockets, well, maybe they're going to challenge the bill, but they've never indicated they're going to challenge this bill. It is subject to review. It is sloppily written. It's unimaginative. I think if it's taken on review, the amendment bill will be thrown out. It'll be thrown out.
Thanks, Raynard.
Okay.
You've got a plane to catch.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attendance. Our online viewers, I know you maybe cannot hear me because I'm please Raynard from this little mic here. So just in conclusion, a huge thank you to our two sponsors this afternoon or this morning that did the presentation as well, Dromex and Uvex. And also a huge, just a reminder that you didn't do CPD points for getting there. For those of us on your devices, you might have seen that your email has already come through. In conclusion, on behalf of Saiosh, maybe got a plan to catch a huge thank you for the service that you give to the Saiosh members on the forum as well as today's presentation.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. No. And the-
The newsletters, we have our next, CPD workshop like this or webinars, looking forward to seeing you soon. Okay.